Amid war and instability, Ukraine has signed a secret agreement that could change the country's fate for the next 100 years. What lies behind this mysterious pact? What strategic resources are involved? And how does this affect the balance of global power? In this video, we will uncover the details of this agreement, explore its geopolitical and strategic implications, and understand why it is so crucial for the future of Ukraine and the world. Get ready for an in-depth analysis that goes beyond the headlines. Welcome. This is the podcast of Colonel Coutinho from the Brazilian Army Reserve. Colonel Coutinho is the editor of the Russian-Ukrainian War Channel and a contributor to the Art of War channel.
E é colaborador do canal ARTE da Guerra. Eu sou a Victoria, assistente de inteligência.
I am Victoria, the artificial intelligence assistant of the channel. In our previous podcast, we discussed the confusing way the peace process for the Russian-Ukrainian conflict was being conducted and tried to find some logic in the chaos. We have already identified some important points. The mineral agreement that began to be negotiated between Presidents Trump of the United States of America and Zelensky of Ukraine proved to be a complicating factor for an already extremely complex issue. A third character moving behind the scenes is Prime Minister Keir Starmer of the United Kingdom. An aspect little publicized in the media was an agreement signed between Starmer and Zelensky.
Foi acordo assinado entre Starmer e Zelensky sobre o que seria esse acordo e como ele pode.
What is this agreement about, and how can it interfere with Trump's mineral agreement? In our podcast this week, we will understand this other agreement, the 100-year agreement with the United Kingdom, and how it can make the negotiations between Zelensky and Trump even more confusing. Shall we?
Vamos lá?
An international 100-year agreement, which almost no one noticed, may be redefining the future of Ukraine and the balance of global power. And today we will reveal why this is much more important than it seems. We're talking about that agreement signed between Zelensky and Starmer in the last days of the Biden administration, aren't we?
Starmer nos últimos dias do governo Biden, não é? O timing não poderia ser mais suspeito.
The timing couldn't be more suspicious. Exactly. This agreement was named the 100-year Partnership Agreement and was signed between Zelensky and Starmer 4 days before Trump's inauguration. Really suspicious. And look at this interesting point. This agreement has 8 main pillars, but one of them, in particular, is causing a real diplomatic earthquake behind the scenes. Pillar 5, about energy and climate. But in reality, what's at stake are mineral resources estimated at over $12 trillion. And these aren't just any resources. We're talking about critical minerals, rare earths, and even uranium.
Estamos falando de minerais críticos, terras raras e até urânio. Basicamente, os elementos essenciais para
Basically, the essential elements to master 21st century technology. So does that mean the United Kingdom had exclusive access to these resources for an entire century? Well, that's where the story gets even more complex, because Trump is also negotiating a deal to gain access to these same resources as part of the peace negotiations. Wow, that explains why the recent diplomatic meetings have been so tense. I heard that General Keith Kellogg had a tough time visiting Zelensky. And there's more. Since this issue of minerals entered the negotiations, even matters like NATO membership and territorial disputes have taken a back seat.
E disputas territoriais ficaram em segundo plano.
Você sabe que as reservas de terras raras da Ucrânia.
Did you know that Ukraine's rare earth reserves are the largest in Europe? We're talking about crucial elements for manufacturing smartphones, electric cars, and much more. Yes, and the most fascinating part is that some of this agreement is secret. As Zelensky himself stated to the Ukrainian parliament, the most important details would not be disclosed publicly. And now, we have that strange sequence of events in London, with Starmer previously meeting with Zelensky, and then Starmer rushing to meet with Trump, seemingly trying to standardize the discourse. Zelensky, in turn, waited for the outcome before going to meet with Trump at the White House. That meeting that ended in confusion, right in the Oval Office, isn't it? That's right. And the situation is indeed delicate. If Zelensky cancels the agreement with the British, he loses a crucial ally. If he maintains it, it could compromise negotiations with Trump. On the other hand, Starmer cannot clash with Trump because of this 100-year agreement, a true geopolitical chess game. Meanwhile, the reserves remain there, practically untouched due to the war, and some are under Russian control at the moment. The most ironic part is that this section of the agreement with the British was labeled as a transition to clean energy.
Recebeu o rótulo de transição para energias limpas. Mas na prática virou uma disputa por poder e influência.
But in practice, it has turned into a struggle for power and global influence. And how does this affect the peace process? Because, without resolving this issue of minerals, it seems that negotiations are not progressing. True, sources close to the negotiations indicate that Trump established the mineral agreement as a precondition for any progress in peace talks. And meanwhile, the tension only increases. Did that meeting in the Oval Office end without an agreement and with new demands being imposed? Yes. And the most concerning part is that this deadlock could further delay the reconstruction of Ukraine. After all, we're talking about resources that could generate billions in revenue for the country.
Que poderiam gerar bilhões em receitas para o país.
E tem também a questão da segurança energética europeia.
And there's also the issue of European energy security, right? These resources are essential to reduce the continent's dependence on other suppliers. Exactly. And this brings us to a crucial question. Does Zelensky have an ace up his sleeve that he hasn't revealed yet? Because this situation seems unsustainable. Well, basically, we have a secret 100-year agreement that could determine not only the future of Ukraine, but also the global balance of power in the coming decades. That's about it. And the most incredible thing is how something so important went practically unnoticed by the international media. A century-long agreement signed in the shadows.
Acordo centenário assinado nas sombras.
Parece que vamos ter novos capítulos dessa história.
It seems we will have new chapters of this story soon, as new meetings between representatives of Ukraine and the Trump administration are taking place in Riyadh. Certainly. And we will continue to closely follow each development. That's it for today, folks. Until next time. Well, this was this week's podcast from the Russian-Ukrainian War Channel. Don't forget to subscribe to the Art of War channel on YouTube and the Russian-Ukrainian War channel on Telegram. Support the channels dedicated to defense topics. Like, comment, and share on your social networks. A big hug. And until the next podcast from Colonel Robinson Farinazzo, the Russian-Ukrainian War channel is a production of GRU, Geopolitics in Action.
Produção do GRU, Geopolítica em Ação.
Bom, gente, na nossa lista de desejos que se encontra aqui na descrição do
Well, folks, in our wish list found here in the video description, you'll find many books about the war in Ukraine. And I remind you that books delivered by Amazon's delivery system arrive quite quickly, okay? But if you're from the generation that prefers a Kindle book, you can download it instantly. The prices are very good, right? The topics are very up to date and will give you a very clear picture of what's happening in the war in Ukraine. And I remind you that every time you buy books and other items on Amazon, you're supporting the ARTE da Guerra channel.
Vocês estão ajudando o canal Arte da Guerra.